I say, let the world go to hell, but I should always have a Dostoevsky book. Well, hello Earthlings. Once more, I'm going to have a video here where I just discuss one of my new favorite authors. This is Fyodor Dostoevsky. So I'm just going to talk about my experience with him so far. Kind of go over some of the books I've read from him and some of my thoughts on the ones that I've read. So just as a background to my experience with Dostoevsky, I started reading him last fall as I was starting to branch out into classic Russian literature, as I'd gotten kind of a firm ground on classic American stuff. So I was looking to branch out into more British and French and Russian. So I started reading Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground. Now I was kind of strangely fascinated by it and really addicted to his writing. So I ended up reading about a handful more of his short stories over the next month or two. Then I read Crime and Punishment back in November. So that's kind of where I am today with his writing. I do want to read everything that he's ever written. It's just one of those authors for me. I think it'll be a very unique journey as I go through his entire catalog. I just think he has very unique framings and ideas for his stories, as often is the case. They're told from a very unique point of view, or from a very unique set of circumstances. They're often very psychologically based case studies, including lovable characters that are always very relatable, and they're always, suffering from, poverty or some other kind of malady. But it's, it just really gets into your head with the characters, though. And his characters always seem to represent ideologically some kind of belief or some kind of unique perspective. So it's always kind of fun to kind of dig into just what these characters are supposed to represent, as well as just to relate with them on the surface level. So without babbling on too much more, let's get into some of the stories I've read from him. First up, I'm going to start with Notes from Underground, which is the first one I read from him. This one is a kind of a weirder story. It's just more of a straight up philosophical manifesto in the first part. Then it kind of goes into a more typical narrative in the second part. So it's kind of a weird way to start with his work. But if you can relate to the main character, then you're pretty much hooked. And I kind of was. So I didn't have any problem with it. On the surface level, it kind of delves into the ideas of utopia and kind of the follies of utopia and how humankind will always come up with problems that they need to experience. Will always come up with conflict because they can't live in peace. So the idea of utopia is just never really going to come to pass on this planet. It also deals very much with mental health and poverty and just the effects of things like that can take on a person's soul. It's kind of a story of a service worker who's, been through some stuff and, yeah. That's all I'll say, yeah. So it's a very unique perspective of his life and the way he kind of deals with things now. The next one I'm going to talk about is The Gambler. This is a more typical story in terms of narrative, as it's just about mainly one character, and then there is also a family that are kind of the secondary characters as well. Kind of the centerpiece of the story is gambling, but there's a lot of family drama, lots of ideas about fortune and misfortune and unrequited love, lots of racism. I wouldn't say racism, just a lot of prejudice and stuff in terms of different peoples and different ideologies. I'd say this is a solid story. Not my favorite of the bunch that I've read so far. I did quite like it well enough. Again, unique characters, very likable characters for the most part, in a kind of a precarious situation. Speaking of likable characters in a precarious situation, White Nights is probably my favorite of the short stories that I've read so far. This one is basically the story of love and loneliness, and it's kind of a sad story, but also it's kind of a dark comedy as well, depending on how you want to look at it. Once again, the main character is incredibly relatable, and some of the thoughts that he has in this story I feel like they've been completely plucked out of my head and put on the page. It's got some really nice setting of the scenes at the beginning of the story. Very atmospheric, very nice writing. Really gets you in the mood for a cold winter night in 19th century Russia. The next one is kind of a unique one. It's a gentle creature, and this one is kind of told from the viewpoint of a man who's, I don't think it was his wife, maybe it was his wife. His partner, she commits suicide, so this is kind of the incoherent thoughts of the guy after she does that. So he kind of goes through their relationship in the past several months of his life. So yeah, it's a very unique premise, very engaging way to tell a story. You can immediately put yourself in that position and kind of realize what kind of state of mind the main character is in. So that's very well done as well. I think parts of it were great. Parts of it did kind of drag on for a while. I think it could have been a lot shorter than it was. But all in all, it was a fairly good short story. And then the last of his short stories are novellas. Again, I can never tell the difference between the two. I'm going to talk about here is The Dream of a Ridiculous Man. This is also one of my favorites of his shorter work so far. Again, a relatable main character. He's kind of down on his luck, kind of at the end of his tether, where he is planning to kill himself. And then he has a dream about being taken to a different place, kind of a new world, so be it. Essentially, it's kind of a beautiful and innocent world, one unlike that he has experienced so far. So he is taken to that place, and it is a Dostoevsky book, so some bad things happen. But at the end, I'm not going to say anything else. But it's one of his more interesting short stories, I think. One of my favorites, definitely. And then finally, the big one is Crime and Punishment, the only full-length novel of his that I've read so far. It's one of his most popular works. I'd say this one and Brothers Karamazov are probably his most popular. This one, I think, is more regarded as one of his easiest to get into. And so the idea of the story is about a man who decides to commit a crime, and then the bulk of the story is just kind of the aftermath of that crime. So it's got all the usual suspects of a Dostoevsky book: relatable characters, illness, sadness, darkness, doomed love, addiction, illness, sadness. It's got an interesting structure, as the inciting incident is kind of done within the first 100 pages. So the rest of the book is kind of the aftermath. It's very philosophical, but unlike notes, it's more woven into the narrative than just the simple monologue. you'll have different characters doing a different monologue at different points of the story. There are a lot of deeper ideas at play here, but mostly the ideas are what kind of questions what is morally right, and when are immoral acts deemed acceptable, and certain people seem to have more leeway in those areas than others do. So it's got a lot of ideas such as that. It's a really fascinating book to think about, even if it does drag on at some points, and some of the story may be kind of silly at certain times. I think it's a book worth reading if you are interested in Russian literature, though I recognize not everyone may like it. So anyways, those are just some basic thoughts on my experiences with Dostoevsky so far. I'm definitely interested in more of his work, like I said, so I'll be reading more of that. Probably get into more of a few more of his books later this year. I think my next one will probably either be The Idiot or Poor Folk. Haven't decided which one yet, so we'll see which ones I come across when I'm in the mood for it. But all in all, that's my experience with Dostoevsky so far. So if you enjoyed this video, I thank you for watching it to the end. And